Mr. President, when President Trump nominated Judge Brett Kavanaugh to serve on the Supreme Court, I believe he made an excellent choice. Judge Kavanaugh has served on the D.C. Circuit Court for 12 years. He has distinguished himself as a careful, independent, and very intelligent judge. This is a headline in the Wall Street Journal, July 10, 2018. They take a look at his record, and this is what they predicted. They said Trump's nominee will be an intellectual leader on the bench. I had a chance to meet with him today, and that's exactly what I think. I think they got it completely right. The newspaper pointed out that he has written opinions that span nearly every significant constitutional issue. Judge Kavanaugh has such a strong reputation that courts around the country actually have relied on his opinions. When you look at his whole record, he's written about 200 majority opinions for the D.C. Circuit Court, in which he serves. Now, he's only been reversed one time by the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court has actually been much more likely to agree with Judge Kavanaugh. In at least 13 different cases over the dozen years that he served on the D.C. Circuit Court, they've adopted his legal reasoning in their own Supreme Court rulings. I mean, to me, that makes him a mainstream judge. In one case involving the separation of powers, Judge Kavanaugh disagreed with the opinion of two other circuit judges. He looked at the text of the Constitution and at the original meaning of those words, which is, to me, what a judge ought to be doing. He wrote that, quote, "The framers of our Constitution took great care to ensure that power in our system was separated into three branches." That's one of the things he and I talked about today, the three branches of government that the Founding Fathers decided in which to separate the powers within our system. And in that writing, Judge Kavanaugh went on to stress the importance of the Constitution's checks and balances, the fundamental principles of which our democracy has been founded. The Supreme Court agreed with Judge Kavanaugh's reasoning, and the court cited his work several times in reaching their own Supreme Court decision. There was another case that dealt with a regulation that was written by the Environmental Protection Agency. Judge Kavanaugh found that the agency exceeded its authority under the law when it wrote its regulation. He wrote, quote, "It's not our job to make the policy changes and set the statutory boundaries, but it is emphatically our job to carefully but firmly enforce the statutory boundaries." What are the boundaries? It's our job to enforce them, not to set them. Again, the Supreme Court took a look at this, looked at his writings from the D.C. District Court and the D.C. Circuit Court, and they agreed with Judge Kavanaugh's reasoning. One constitutional scholar pointed out that Judge Kavanaugh commands wide and deep respect among scholars, lawyers, judges, and justices. Another legal scholar said Judge Kavanaugh is one of the most learned judges in America on a variety of issues, ranging from theories of statutory interpretation to separation of powers. A third law professor agreed. This professor called Judge Kavanaugh, quote, "a true intellectual, a leading thinker, and a writer on the subjects of statutory interpretation and federal courts." So here's what we know about Judge Kavanaugh. It's clear he's a person of strong character. We hear this from people who have known him in the community and people who have worked with him for years in the court. It's clear Judge Kavanaugh has exactly the right approach, in my opinion, to being a judge. He said it very plainly in a speech last year. He said, "A judge's job is to interpret the law, not to make the law or make policy." That's what judges are supposed to do. I think that's the standard that the Americans should be applying to anyone who's nominated to this high position. Then you look at these endorsements from legal scholars. You look at the number of times the Supreme Court has followed his opinions, followed his reasoning, followed his thought pattern. It is clear that Judge Kavanaugh has the incredibly strong intellect that we want in a Supreme Court justice. When we see someone who commands this kind of respect from the experts, I think senators really need to take that into consideration. So I met with Judge Kavanaugh, as I said early this morning. I enjoyed a long discussion on various topics relating to the law, the Constitution, the separation of powers, and I hope my Democrat colleagues will meet with him as well. I look forward to having a full and thoughtful confirmation process